So you want to get into your first aerobatics competition, but you don't actually know how to do it? That is what we're going to be discussing today on the channel. If you enjoy this kind of content, please hit the like button down below. Consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment on what topic you would like to talk about next, and we'll go through it. Okay, so aerobatics competitions, what exactly are they? Well, they are a showcase for pilots to be able to show off their skills in an airplane doing aerobatics, and they get judged by a panel of judges, and obviously the best score wins. Yeah. So that is an aerobatics competition in a nutshell, but exactly how does it work? First things first, a day before the competition, we have to set out what we call the markers or the box. Now, the box is actually a 1 kilometer squared piece of airspace, and minimum altitude is 300 feet. So essentially it's from 300 feet up to 3,300 feet, 3,000 feet being pretty much 1 kilometer. And so it's a 1 kilometer squared box that you are going to fly all of your maneuvers in. So the first thing to do is to actually lay out the box markers so that when you're flying in the air, when you look down at the ground, you can actually see the corners of the box and most importantly, the center of the box, which is marked by an X. Now, how we do that here is we actually put down plastic tops. Those sheets on the ground, you can actually see them from the air quite clearly. A lot of aerobatic airfields around the world have permanent cemented blocks that are painted white, which is obviously much easier, much simpler, but in New Zealand we don't have any specific aerobatic airfields or airfields where aerobatics is the primary function of that airfield. And so we go and put out those box markers, and once we've set out those box markers, it's then time to practice.
Righto guys, closing the cockpit.
So the day before the competition, usually you get quite a few aircraft coming into the area. There's quite a lot of practicing going on, a few last minute tweaks to their sequence, a lot of coaching on the ground. And what coaching consists of is essentially you're flying the aircraft, there's someone on the ground on the same frequency as you, and what they're doing is they're giving you information based on what they see, which is what the judges would see, on how to better fly your sequence. Because when you're flying in the cockpit versus looking on the ground, the two aspects are completely different. Something that you might think looks great while you're flying and feels really good might not look good on the ground, and so you have to modify how you fly to give the judges the best perspective so that you can get the most amount of points.
Terrible. The first half's looking good, the second half is just flattening out still.
Okay.
Now, we did the ACROFest in February this year, and the ACROFest essentially is a collective competition where everyone, regardless of the class, is competing for the same trophy. And even if you're competing in Unlimited, which is the hardest category, or you're competing in Basic, which is the easiest category, you're all fighting for the same trophy. Now, why do it that way? Well, it's just a really fun get together, a really fun competition, and it makes for a good practice slash competitive arena where you can get ready for the nationals, which is the following month. Even though this year it didn't happen, mainly because of COVID, but the ACROFest is still a lot of fun, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to try and better yourself in front of a panel of judges, which is really difficult to do just on a day-to-day basis when you're practicing by yourself. Not only that, coaching itself is actually quite a skill. You need someone who has knowledge about how judging works and what they want to see from the ground. And so to find someone, it's sometimes difficult, and so the ACROFest is a perfect place to not only fly a competition where there are prizes and a little bit of the respect aspect, because if you're in a higher class and you do better than someone in a lower class, it means that you're flying to a much higher level, and that's quite cool for pilots, especially as they move up in the ranks. So how does the competition work? So day one, you arrive for the pre-flight briefing or the pre-competition briefing. This happens on both days, depends on how long a competition is. It could be just a 1-day competition, 2 days, but every morning you will arrive for a pilot briefing. What they discuss in that is obviously health and safety. They talk about the starting procedure. Remember that when you're flying aerobatics, you are in that competitive mindset. Sometimes you forget things. And as an aerobatic club, we have what we call a starter. It's someone who walks around, gets the next competitor ready for flying, but also makes sure that they've done all of their checks. Because when you're competing, it's not like with motor vehicles where if you've forgotten something bad might occur, but it's on the ground. With aircraft, obviously, there is very little margin for error, and if something goes wrong in the air, there's a higher risk of having an accident that could be tragic. So very important position in the starter, and they actually have a written checklist which they get pilots to go through before flying, one of the key people at a competition. Then you obviously have all the volunteers that are running around like chickens without a head, trying to get pilots into the place, parking aircraft, making sure that the public or any visitors are in the right place, and just doing general admin tasks. Then of course you have the judges. Generally at a competition there is 3 judges at one panel. Sometimes, depending on the competition, they might have more judges and they might have multiple panels to create an unbiased judging environment for the competition. Now in terms of the ACROFest, we have 3 judges. We have the chief judge and we have 2 other judges. Now the chief judge, his responsibility is to make sure the other judges know who's flying, to talk to the pilot, make sure that they know when to start their sequence. By communicating over the radio with them, they'll tell them when to come into the aerobatic box and when to start their sequence.
Well done, you can commence when ready.
Yeah, roger that. Just had a few loose straps.
It is then up to the competitor. Once they've got the go-ahead to start their sequence, they then can fly around, get themselves into position. They wag their wings to say that they're starting, and then they'll start their sequence. In general, most judges have what we call a scribe. A scribe is someone who sits next to you, and as you are watching the maneuver happening and you're deciding whether it's a exact shape, slightly egg-shaped, or whatever the case is, and as you are downgrading, once you're finished with that maneuver, you will say the score and the scribe will actually write it down. Then at the end of the sequence, you as the judge will sign the piece of paper to say that the scores are correct, and that will then go into the box, which will then get tallied up later in the day. On that note, scribe is another place where people can get involved in aerobatics without actually flying, and they get to understand more about aerobatics. So if you would like to join aerobatics, but you're not sure about flying and you just want to dip your toes in, the scribe position as a volunteer is the perfect place to start. You get to hang out with the judges, watch airplanes, get more of an understanding of how aerobatics looks, how it's judged, before actually getting into the airplane and doing your first competition. And then of course you have the pilots. Now, prior to the competition, you will select one of the classes that you would like to do. Generally, you will start in the beginning in either basic or sportsman. Now, basic or sportsman can be done by most entry-level aerobatic aircraft. Do you have a Cessna 152 Aerobat? They're not very powerful, but they can complete basic and sportsman maneuvers. And just so you know, they are still very competitive, especially if you can fly it really well. And because they don't have a lot of power, you really have to work on maintaining energy through the sequence. A very good place to start, because energy management is one of the top priorities of a pilot during a flying sequence. But regardless, you can start flying aerobatics with pretty much any aerobatic certified aircraft. And honestly, the aerobatic community is really welcoming. We love to see new people there, new faces. So if you have an aircraft thinking about doing aerobatics, or you hiring an aircraft from your local aero club or flight school, come along, do some flying. Right, then you get the step up from there, which is generally intermediate class. Most of the time in intermediate, you're gonna have things like Yak 52s, Vans, RV8s, things that have a inverted oil system and inverted fuel system, because there is inverted flying present in those sequences. They are a bit more difficult. They have more maneuvers included into the basic maneuvers, which are either lines, loops, stall turns, those type of things. From intermediate, you move up to advanced. If you want to fly in advanced, you do need to have a thoroughbred aerobatic aircraft. Something like a Pit Special, a Giles 200 or 202, Extra 300. Pretty much any aircraft that is designed to pull at least +6 to +8 Gs and have a -G rating of probably -4 to -6, somewhere around there. And it has to have an inverted oil system and inverted fuel system. Otherwise, you will find your engine cutting out or potentially having a mechanical failure. So, of course, in terms of technical inspection before a competition, every aircraft goes through what we call tech, or an inspection, and what they're looking for is, can your aircraft, or is your aircraft capable of the class that you have signed up for? For instance, if you sign up for advanced and you bring a Cessna 150, you're not going to be able to do it. Of course, the Cessna Aerobats have gravity-fed fuel systems, so as soon as you roll upside down, no more fuel, and the engine's going to starve and die. And for advanced, you're doing long distances inverted, you're doing inverted spins, you're doing all sorts of things that that aircraft is just not capable of doing, not to mention inverted or negative G pushes, which that aircraft is just not made for and cannot cope with. So very important that you have an aircraft for the class that you're trying to do. And as I said, you're always starting right at the bottom with pretty much anything. Right, step up from there. The last and final category, unlimited, is essentially advanced, but with much more complicated maneuvers. So instead of, say, having a hammerhead maneuver where you go up, you stall and you come straight down, maybe with one roll on the way down or one snap roll, unlimited might have something like you pull up to 45, you do half a roll, opposite roll, push to vertical, 3/4 roll, opposite half a snap, stall over the top, 3/4 snap down, and then go out. So the amount of maneuvers within a base maneuver is much higher, and so you need a very high performance aircraft. So you'll need something that can do ±10 G most of the time. Pit Specials, I know, have been capable of unlimited in the past, but they're very much on the marginal line in terms of power and G tolerance. Things like the Extra 330, 300, Edge 540, Game Bird, Gen Pro, all of these modern high performance machines, those are made for this type of aerobatics. Now, if any of you guys have watched my content, I fly a Giles 202. That is rated to ±10 G. Now let's talk about the results. The Acrofest was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. There was a known and an unknown sequence. So when you fly a competition, you generally have what we call a known, which is a sequence that's already created for you. You then have what we call a free known, which wasn't part of the Acrofest, but is part of normal competition. And a free known is essentially a sequence that is designed by you which has enough difficulty in it to be considered part of that class. And there are certain maneuvers you have to use. If you'd like to know how I design a sequence and how the whole sequence design aspect works, leave a comment down below and I will make a separate video, because that is actually a really complicated concept. It's much easier once you've practiced and you've done it for a while, but it will take a lot of time. So let me know down below if you'd like to see how I create a free known sequence. After a free known, you then have what we call unknown. An unknown is a sequence designed by another pilot, and what it is a sequence that is completely unknown to you. You get it the night before generally, or on the morning of the competition that you're meant to fly that particular sequence. There's no practice, there's nothing like that. You use that time to memorize the sequence, you put it in your aircraft and you go and fly it, and you basically fly it without having flown it ever before. And that creates more competition and an aspect of, can you overcome that situation, which is really cool. It's a really fun part of it. In Unlimited, the unknowns get quite insane. Right, and then the last aspect of it, some competitions, right at the end, they have what they call a freestyle competition. A freestyle competition is you have designed your own flowing, very dance maneuver-like or choreographed flight. You usually do it to music, which is why I call it choreographed, because you would have designed it to both impress the judges, flow with precision, and keep it within that space so it's nice and exciting. And that is essentially the freestyle competition. If you don't know or have never heard of freestyle, I'll put a little video here quickly of Rob Holland. He is the world champion freestyle aerobatic pilot. Right, then after each category, so if you've flown the known, generally there'll be a lunch break or something like that. The judges will go back, the admin volunteers will generally punch all those numbers into a computer, and there will be a score that will be plopped out, and that score you will carry on into the next section. Right at the end, all of that is tallied up, you get an average score, and that average score is what you take at the end. Now for the Acrofest was a lot of fun. I was flying Unlimited, the only person flying Unlimited, and I was hoping to do really well. In terms of the amount of practice I got leading up to the competition, I felt really happy with my flying. I made a mistake during a flight. The maneuver looked great. I was meant to do a 3/4 snap roll and end up flying into the next sequence. I did that 3/4 snap roll, but I did it the wrong direction. So instead of flying from right to left, in the judge's perspective, I was flying from left to right. And even though the rest of the maneuvers were really good, and up until I think the last maneuver, the judges thought, okay, well, he's done all the maneuvers, he's done pretty good. They then had to zero all those maneuvers, because when you look at an arrestee or a flight sequence, there is a wind direction, and it shows you which direction each maneuver has to go. And that's why it becomes even more difficult when you get into the higher classes, because you have 3/4 rolls, which can either make you go left or make you go right. And so all of that stuff has to be written down in your sequence. I had written it down. However, the day before I had been practicing the other direction or the other wind direction, and so the muscle memory made me go that way. I didn't look at the sequence card, and so ended up zeroing pretty much half of my sequence. Now throughout the ACROFest there were only 2 flights. There was the known flight and there was an unknown flight. The unknown flight went better. However, because we were very short on volunteers due to COVID, I was both judging and helping as a starter. And so when the time came to fly, I only had about an hour to sort of look at my sequence before actually getting into the aircraft. It does make a difference. The more time you can spend rehearsing the unknown by standing there and looking like you're a traffic robot, generally the better you can do. And so, unfortunately, the sequence went pretty well, but I did make a few mistakes, and most of them were just because I did not know the sequence, and not knowing the sequence and trying to read it, as you can see from this footage, while you're upside down ends up with a situation like this.
9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and
Overall though, I really enjoyed the weekend. The ACROFest was extremely fun. A huge thanks to the New Zealand Aerobatic Club. All of them are just amazing people. It's just a fantastic group environment, and I have no doubt that the rest of the world has their own aerobatic clubs, and all of the pilots are very much the same. They all want to see more people in the sport. They want more competition. It's fun when there is more people around, when there's more stuff happening, and when there are more volunteers who can take up those jobs, so that as a pilot, you can just fly. If you're a judge, you can just judge, and everyone has their own specific task. So if you would like to join an aerobatic club, please don't feel shy. Please don't feel like you have to be some Top Gun pilot. No. Every single pilot has started somewhere, and that is always right at the bottom, just flying basic sportsman with your local aero club or flight school plane. Now guys, I really hope you enjoyed this informative video. If you like this format of video, which I'd like to do more often, where we sit and discuss a particular topic, and I've got some video to show you as well, please leave a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and as always, my name is Captain Lawrence. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, obviously here on YouTube, and onwards and upwards.